a number of cases that have been in court for a while, and we have seen their conclusion in the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Heavy penalties being imposed. Just by quick way of brief, just mention some of those ones that have, come out of the courts recently.
So yeah, we've been having our own earthquake this week. Events of seismic proportions. So it's been the whole week, not just Monday, but Monday is a big one because I think it's clearly the biggest fine ever imposed in the history of Kenya, almost 10 B. And this is the case involving the National Social Security Fund. We had some officials and we have some people from the Discount Securities Limited. And basically, and this is why it's so important, it's so close to our hearts as Kenyans. This is a pension fund. And a pension fund is allowed to invest in a number of things. You can do real estate, you can do currency, you can do stocks. But somehow they managed to get 1.2 B out of NSSF and just lose it, evaporated. And that's why the fines are so heavy, because when the court finally determined the case, it says, for every shilling that was lost, we are punishing you times 2, double the punishment. So that's why you find the first accused, Muthui, his fine is 2.4 B. That's double the 1.2 that was lost. And the company itself, Discount Securities Limited, ended up being fined 4.8 B. So cumulatively that plus the directors, it comes to 9.6, 9.8 B. So this is by far the biggest and the most severe fine imposed in Kenyan courts.
I saw someone just responding to that on Twitter and saying, si wangewanyonga tu mara moja. Where is that money going to come from? I mean, you've been fined 2.4 billion shillings.
With the alternative and a prison sentence?
Yes, and failure to pay the fine, you go to jail.
You go to jail.
Right.
Yeah.
Up to how many years? Because obviously that's what they're probably looking at.
Yeah, 14 years. Yeah.
Unless they invested in...
This is just my imagination here. It's not based on anything factual. Yes, they've been fined. Does it then take into consideration that in realizing what is required by the courts, they may need to offload some of their assets? Why I ask the question is because when you recover assets, is there a way in which, do you go into the process of determining everything that someone has and in ensuring that they have no access to it if they're in the situation that these people were in?
Yeah, that's a great question because there's two elements to it. So the criminal prosecution is primarily concerned with punishment. You're punishing this person for what they've done wrong.
Yes.
Okay. So assume your kid jumps over the fence and steals mangoes. Steal 5 mangoes. What is the punishment? You say 10 canes because you stole 5 mangoes. So 2 canes for each mango. But that doesn't restore the mangoes to your neighbor.
True, right.
So we have another path, and that's why, as Latif was doing the introduction, you're saying asset recovery. That's the other avenue that we use. We file civil cases and we try and restore what was lost to the people who lost it. Now, not all cases follow that path, and for this one in particular, the NSSF one, the fine is so huge that what's going back to the government is almost double what was lost in each count. In fact, it's not almost double, because if they lost 1.2 at the beginning and the fines are 9.6, that's almost 8 times. So what we're trying to do, and we're working closely with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. By the way, let me mention the DPP because they've done a sterling job, not just in that case, but in many others, is the conviction-based forfeiture, where you go and tell the court that because CT was corrupt, hypothetically CT.
Thank you.
Very important.
That was absolutely necessary. Because everybody's saying,
Yeah.
Not people who are saying,
We
yes,
had it
you had EACC
on-
calling you corrupt.
on
So
SpiceFM.
it must be true. So hypothetically, CT, if you abused your position and you made so much money, we would like to have it restored to the people you got it from. So basically, we are working with the DPP and we're saying, because you've been found guilty, restore NSSF. and that's one of the discussions that's ongoing.
Yeah.
So that's one case, the NSSF case.
That's Monday, so I can do for you blow by blow. Monday,
Nice.
Tuesday, Wednesday,
Tuesday.
Thursday.
We need good news.
Tuesday.
Water resources management, and you guys know how maji ni shida hapa Nairobi. It's troublesome. So, and it's a weird case because the guy is called James Ambuso, and he's been asking for bribes from people within the organization to facilitate them, because that's ridiculous. That's like the finance manager here asking you for money to facilitate you to go for a meeting for your operations, and it's organizational money. And the bribes weren't huge, it's like 300 here, 400 here.
Shillings.
1,000.
Okay. And City is appalled because they said it's not huge.
Yes, it's not huge.
By Kenyan standards, 300,000 bribe,
But are you aware
400,000.
that's the money that many people get if they're lucky after working for 30 years?
That is true.
Yes, that is true. And
That is so true.
Yes, and that's why the law is coming down hard on these type of guys, because when the fines came out, everything was double. So when he was taking 300,000, 400,000, the ultimate fine was 7.4 million. So on the one hand, he was taking below 500,000, but he's been fined 7.4 million. In default, he's going to serve, let me see, is that also 14 years?
24 years.
Yes, 24 years. Yes.
Now,
Nice.
the question then popped out from a lot of folks after that, Philip, was that here we are with folks who stole 1.2
Billions up here.
billion,
Yeah.
and it's 14
All
years
retirees' money.
of retirees' money, right?
Uh-huh.
And he's 14 years in default of payment of the fine, right? So here is somebody with significantly less than that, then being given 24 years in default.
Yeah.
Why? Is there that discrepancy?
All right. So, when the judicial officer, the magistrate, they have discretion. So it's like between 1 year and 10 years.
Yeah.
So it can be anywhere in between depending on the circumstances of the case. But there's another thing that we don't remember. Some of these sentences are given concurrently, others are handed down consecutively. So concurrently is when they say, okay, I've told you 5 years, 4 years, 3 years here, but they'll be served at the same time. So cumulatively it won't go beyond the 5 years. But in some cases you say consecutively. So if it's 2 years,
Finish
3
three,
years, 4
go
years,
to
Count
four,
1, 2
goes to
years,
24.
and then
Yes.
count 2, 3 years.
Okay.
That's
Yes.
5.
Consecutive is the one you say 2,
One after
3,
the other.
you serve all.
cumulatively
1 plus
you add
1.
them up,
Cumulative,
yeah.
Do they have a right of appeal?
Everybody in Kenya has right to appeal. And,
All the way to the Supreme Court?
And I appreciate this question, Wanjiru, because
Because
Before we come to that right of appeal, because we'll consolidate all those into right of appeal, let's hear the wins first. So that was Tuesday.
that was Tuesday.
Wednesday.
Let me see what we did on Wednesday, because
I
we
can't
did a
even
lot.
remember. Busy. There are many.
Wednesday, another thing close to my heart, asset recovery. Watu wa Bungoma, and if I don't know if you guys have a frequency for Bungoma, but
Yes.
their county people were taking money to travel. I don't know where they were supposed to go, and then they didn't travel and they didn't return the money until we investigated, and when they realized things were getting serious, they said they're going to return the money.
Okay.
But that was 17 million. Okay. But because it's a few years ago, we were like, but 17 million 5 years ago is not 17 million
Interest.
today. So we've
Appreciation.
imposed some interest, and I think the total amount they're going to pay back is 25 million.
So that's like an out-of-court settlement? Or?
Yes, exactly, because we are engaging and we're applying alternative dispute resolution
resolution.
mechanisms,
Mm.
and these ones are also in the Constitution, Article 252.
So what?
Kind of like a plea bargain. You won't go
Yes.
to jail if you return the money.
Yes, and there's a policy, so it's not just kienyeji. You just don't.
And
do
you
it
keep
off
your
paper.
job?
Yes.
In
you
this
keep your
particular
job.
case, they keep
and I
that.
can explain why they would keep their jobs. The issue about allowances does not always give rise to criminal culpability, and in fact, there's a High Court decision from the, I think, Constitutional Division of the Judicial Review Division, where they said it can be resolved administratively. They could dock your salary, but remember, they're in Bungoma. They're all in cahoots. Who's going to dock them their wages, their salaries? So we have to come in and we say, okay, if you don't return the money, we're going to charge you, and we want interest. So 17 million a few years ago, 25 million today.
Okay.
Wednesday. Thursday?
Thursday. So this was coming out in the media today morning, and this is, we got orders to freeze 1 billion Kenya shillings worth of assets belonging to a guy who works for the Kenya Rural Roads Authority.
Our guy.
Kira.
Yeah, I think
Our
his name is
investor.
Benson or something. Yes.
Yes.
Our case study for the morning.
Yeah.
Billionaire who cannot access his wealth.
So tell us about this particular case. We looked at this in the morning. It's in the papers, yes.
Yes.
And this is the case where Justice Esther Maina said the Kera regional manager for Coast, Benson Muteti Masila, is not going to be able to access any of these properties. These are or proceeds out of them. These are apartment blocks in Kariobangi, apartment block in Dandora, 3 apartments in Mathare, 6 plots in Wote Town, 2 plots in Athi River, valued at 237 million shillings. His wife, Mwongeli, has an apartment worth 5 million shillings in Imara Daima, registered under her name. Other properties worth 100 million registered under the names of their schools, Mombe Junior and Mombe Girls. Justice Maina also froze Masila's 9 accounts at KCB, National Bank, Cooperative Bank, Barclays Bank. But Masila went to court and said, these people of EACC came and they asked me, can you prove how you acquired this wealth?
Yeah, sure.
And I produced all the evidence,
The receipts.
everything. I produced receipts. I even showed this is how much I invested, this is how much it was making, the returns, this is how much profit, this is how I reinvested. But because of, and he said, witch hunt.
Oh, wow.
Now you've gone to court.
And previously, EACC has made it public knowledge that if you're able to prove the source of your income and you're able to, show all your documentation, then it's okay. If you can explain to us, then you should be all right. Fella did that, and he's not understanding why now
Why him?
EACC and the tentacles will not let him go.
Just wait.
Yes.
He says he provided evidence.
Yes, no. He
According to
provided
him,
documentation as to where he's getting all of this
his
money.
defense in court.
he provided documentation.
Yes.
He provided what he thinks is evidence. The question I'm asking is, does EACC tell you what constitutes evidence?
What is satisfactory
Or
and
what
what
is
is
that?
not?
Yes,
satisfactory
then-
documentation
Yes.
that will then let you off the hook,
Yes.
Philip?
All right, so I could talk about this the whole day. So the issue, firstly, is it's not really evidence, it's an explanation.
Okay.
So we don't go and take your stuff, on a whim, okay? The investigation has already been done. That's why Latif is able to read that asset portfolio, and I know he's drooling because he's wishing one day he's going to have apartments all over the place. But the investigation is already done. We've already established that you're the owner, the proprietor of all these assets.
So by the time you ask, you know.
We know, okay? And it's a great thing for lawyers. Lawyers should never ask questions whose answer they don't already know. By the time you're asking for an explanation, it's because maybe we've missed something. We don't know. You could be, maybe you inherited, and it's a perfectly plausible explanation. Maybe ulikula sport pesa. Again, that's fine. Just explain to us. And in some cases, we actually do take off some things because we didn't have the evidence at the beginning. You've given an explanation, we verified it, and we chalk off. So let's say if it was 1B, it's possible to chalk off 200, 300 million and remain with 700 million. So that does happen. And then back to City. It's not done arbitrarily. We don't just decide we're now going to take it away. We now go to court. So what is the first ingredient? You have assets that are disproportionate to your known legitimate sources of income. Remember, the guy is a public servant, isn't it? His salary is known. He completes a wealth declaration, the declaration of income, assets and liabilities, every 2 years, biannually. So we see it, we know how much he's earning, we know what his income is, his assets and his liabilities. So there's a huge disproportion. And then we say, now because there's a disproportion, come in and explain to us. Because something may have happened. Maybe you're an astute investor.
Yes.
Maybe you went into Tesla and you got millions of dollars. That's fine, but just come and explain to us why somebody who wants, let's give him the benefit of doubt. Let's say he was even earning 500,000 per month. Okay, that's 6 million a year. Even if you give him 10 years, that's 60 million. And assuming he doesn't spend a cent, how is he worth $1 billion?
See, he bought Bitcoin.
Explanation.
See,
Okay?
we
That is also an
concluded he
explanation.
went to the school of kleptonomy and has skills that other people don't have.
And I think that's the thing we should also be asking ourselves. What are these guys doing that is so special that we're unable to do? You're on the grind. Wanjira, I don't know what time you woke up today just to be here.
Yeah.
Everybody's on the grind. So why is it that this person has so much money and then he can't explain when we ask him to explain?
And then, in fact, the impact on business people and entrepreneurs is also disproportionate. People who are trying to do
Legitimate.
the legitimate thing.
And that word is part of the ingredients. Is known legitimate sources of income. So you can't tell me you're a pimp and that's a legitimate source. It doesn't work like that.
See, Uchawi.
So had he declared
Maombi.
actually his
Yeah,
assets?
they have to.
They're
do
on
it.
record.
Everybody has to do it. And if I had a penny for every crazy explanation I'm given, I mean, I'd be a millionaire myself.
Right.
Right.
So
Legitimately.
let's come to the question of appeals then, Wanjiru.
Yes.
Right. You know, is he likely to appeal? Do you freeze the assets?
Yes.
You know, because then Kenyans could be waiting for another 10, 15 years.
All right, so we'll be oscillating between the assets and the punishment. The reason we freeze the assets is so that between the time we start the investigation, go to court and get a judgment, we don't want this person selling off, disposing of the assets, because you could have a judgment that's not worth the paper it's written on. You have a fantastic judgment which you cannot realize. That's why we hold the assets. Okay. In terms of the appeal, everybody has a right of appeal, and it's one of the things I get bashed on social media, because they keep saying there's an MP who's walking around in Parliament freely. Well, yes, he was convicted, but he has exercised his right of appeal. And let me just assure Kenyans that the appeal will come to a close one day, sooner or later. This NSSF case started in 2010. It took 12 years, and that's just the magistrate's court. Okay, but we'll come to a close. Now, all that happens is that these people are granted bail pending appeal. Again, which is a constitutional right for everyone. Even murderers get bail pending appeal. And the only reasons a court might decline to release you on bail is if you're a flight risk, or you're likely to interfere with the witnesses or the evidence. You know, there have to be grounds to deny somebody bond or bail pending appeal. So yeah, everybody can exercise appeal. What I think is a concern of many Kenyans is, if somebody can go and get bail pending appeal and they'll do their appeal while they're outside, the first case took 5 to 10 years. Okay. We don't know how long it will take in the High Court, but let's give them credit. Let's say about 3 years, and then the Court of Appeal another 2 years.
It's a
And
lifetime.
yeah, and a few of those cases actually find their way to the Supreme Court if this person can argue that there's a constitutional issue. So it might be 15 to 20 years.
How does that then serve as an effective deterrent? Because you've said this before, you specifically, Philip, have said, you know, when we see some of these arrests of these big fish, as it were, it would serve as a deterrent to anybody who has their hands in the cookie jar. But then if you see that it can be wrapped up in appeal for the next 20, 25 years, or if a case goes to court, it's in the initial court for 10 years, then it goes into appeal for 3 years. It may go to the apex court for another 2-3 years. How does that effectively serve as a deterrent to anybody else who would say, you know what, then I can do this business as much as I want in the meantime, and I can still almost basically walk away scot-free, because look what's happening with these other folks. They're walking about living their lives as though nothing happened.
But scot-free and your assets have been frozen.
Well, look, Scott. Look, there is something I would assume that freedom does for you. That you're not behind bars, for example, or that you haven't been convicted. To an extent, you're free.
Yeah,
And if we're looking at the general public, even this, the general public seeing that somebody can appeal and still go about
Everybody
their
else is just
business,
looking at you living your life.
you're living your life.
But if assets are frozen, that's a start.
yeah,
they remain frozen.
Yeah, and let's be honest, even on a human level, nobody wants a case. If you have even a small administrative issue here at work, you have a
You don't want it
disciplinary
hanging over
procedure,
your head.
it's hanging over your head. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. Every day, you know, you're getting closer to this case being determined. And ultimately, there'll be a sentence. No matter what you do, there'll be a sentence ultimately. But what I'd like to clarify is this. A lot of those cases were old cases. They're only coming to fruition now because of the consistent efforts of the law enforcement agencies, that's the EACC and the DPP. But a number of things happened around 2015, 2016 when the CJ established a special division, the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Division. So the cases which have been going to court post-2015 have been moving rather quickly. Okay? So anybody who has a case and they know they're going to court post-2015, you know, is going to conclude soon. The Water Resources Management Authority case, that was a 2019 plea, concluded January 2022. So, and I think there is evidence of commitment from the new CJ because she undertook to clear a backlog of cases, including corruption cases. And maybe we are seeing accumulation, you know, like a perfect storm of things. You have EACC working diligently, prosecutors working well, and the judiciary saying we need to clear these cases. That's why you've seen maybe a surge of decisions coming out in recent times.
That's great, you know, having this process shortened. There's a sense that the big fish, especially the really big fish, are getting away. And that it's the middle level. Even though I think the middle level do a lot of damage systemically and consistently. But what about the big fish?
All right. So Anybody who has assets worth 1 billion, like our Kera guy, you really can't call them small fish. They're probably richer than some of our politicians, some of our leaders. Okay,
Many of our politicians.
yes,
not some.
they're wealthier than most of those guys. The importance of having big fish is maybe the statement, that law enforcement is serious, and that's why we're always happy to remind people that we have 9 governors in court right now. It's unprecedented. That's almost 20% of all governors, and there are many cases, investigations which are ongoing. Okay, so 9 governors out of 47 is no small number. Yeah, and I think that represents a significant proportion of big fish.
There's what you're doing with, like, as the EACC in this particular case, where you're going for freezing of the assets here. This is EACC. But then there's also the Asset Recovery Agency. Is it a duplication of roles? Or where does the Asset Recovery Agency begin and end, and where does the EACC begin and end?
Right. So the proper term would be overlap, and overlap happens in law enforcement agencies because crime is crime. Okay, but just to clarify for our listeners, the Asset Recovery Agency recovers assets which are the proceeds of all crime. Okay, so if it's drugs, ARA can recover. If it's poaching, ARA can recover. Anti-terrorism, ARA can recover. EACC is a designated agency to deal with corruption. The assets that we recover are proceeds of one crime, corruption. So that's it. So sometimes there's an overlap because the DCI again can investigate all crimes, including corruption. EACC can only investigate corruption. And sometimes there's an overlap. Yes.
We were having, there was an amazing conversation yesterday on the kleptocracy and how it's become pervasive. And the question around some of the barriers in law. What may we have missed that has made kleptocracy, in fact, it wasn't on corruption, it was just looking at public officers who subvert public processes to enrich themselves. What are these legal barriers that, that we may have missed?
So this really gets me going because in one of these cases, we succeeded this week. There's an additional order that person cannot be in public service for 10 years.
10 years.
So there's a connection. Okay, there's a connection between this corruption and the caliber of our leadership. And let's not forget that corruption and politics also go hand in hand. Somebody who invests so much to get in public office will obviously try and recoup their investments. So we have a constitution, and our constitution is amazing. It's up here. It's aspirational. I cannot say it's perfect. That's why there's always a debate about whether we should amend it or we shouldn't amend it. But it's so high compared to the actual laws themselves. And the law I'm talking about right now is the Leadership and Integrity Act, because that's a law we should have been saying you can't be in office if you're charged. Okay, but who are we relying on to pass laws?
It's parliamentarians, politicians.
Yeah. So I mean,
The threshold was dropped to the bottom.
But what is this threshold? When you say that this threshold was watered down, so the ideals of Chapter 6 of the Constitution on leadership and integrity say that somebody who has questionable integrity should not occupy public office via nomination, appointment, election.
Yes.
Sindio? The law that operationalizes this chapter, what does it say?
Iko tu hapa. It does not have sanctions. It does not have penalties. It does not say that this is the precise thing which if you do, you cannot go back to your office.
It doesn't define integrity.
It does not define integrity. It says the things that are wrong, like lack of financial probity, But it doesn't say that if you lack financial probity, you should go to jail for 6 months.
Was that always the case? Has it always been that way?
That act was like that. It was diluted at inception, 2012. And in fact, some people went to court. I think the Commission on Implementation of the Constitution went to court in 2012 saying, well, the argument was that it was unconstitutional because the Constitution is up here, but the law is down here. And unfortunately, that argument did not carry the day because the court said you cannot say it's unconstitutional. You can say it does not meet the expectations of Kenyans, but you cannot say it's unconstitutional. But all hope is not lost, and I'll tell you why. So you have the sources of the law. You have like the Constitution and our statutes, our written law, but we have the courts. And as long as our courts keep interpreting the laws, even when they're a bit weak, with the constitution at the back of their mind, and I know sometimes people call that judicial activism. We're getting there, and that's why we got a very innovative way to deal with governors. They can't go back to the office because the office is a crime scene.
Sure.
And, that's amazing. So all hope is not lost, but we have an opportunity. We're going into elections soon, right? And it's one of the things, I think, if you heard the boss, Major Twale, we keep saying, you guys have a role to play. Apart from reporting and abstaining from corruption, you can vote in leaders with integrity. And if you do that, then our chances of passing laws which are stronger are even higher.
So basically, the responsibility to enforce and implement Chapter 6 begins with the citizen.
Yeah, because I think people...
If we elect people of if we determine that, I don't really trust this person's character because of their integrity, I shouldn't vote for them.
We have a tendency to treat government as if it's an alien thing, it's an abstract thing. But, it's still us. There's nobody here who doesn't have a relative in government or a friend in government. Basically, it's us. But Wanjiro had something to ask?
Yeah, I had two questions. I had one question on the issue of public officer immunity, because there's this clause written in to every act, every law. There's this clause that gives, is it indemnity or immunity from prosecution for a public officer who executes, their mandate in office in good faith or something.
Yes.
And in our discussion, we find that this clause is giving undue cover to officers to violate the law. So we have people continuing in office who are even recorded by the Auditor General, but they're in office until you can prosecute them in the court system, maybe up to the Supreme Court. So we're on such a merry-go-round. So do we need to remove this clause? Is this a standard practice in all jurisdictions?
That clause protects me too. So, for instance, if we arrest someone and then they say it was malicious prosecution, the court will say, but the guy was doing his job in good faith. And by the way, if you're breaking the law, that's outside your mandate. So you cannot say you're doing it in good faith. Okay, whatever you're doing is outside the mandate. It's outside what you're supposed to have been doing. So that clause will not protect you. It is there to protect people who are doing their jobs in good faith in the event that something goes wrong and that person says you are being malicious.
So a military officer, for example, who is driving a Probox and it's carrying illegal aliens,
is a crook.
cannot say,
Will not benefit from that clause.
good faith. Nilikuwa nasaidia
No.
Mkenya
The other discussion that's going on is around the Degwa Commission provision that public officers can engage in business.
Yes.
Is this something, of course, BBI wanted to revisit it. BBI wasn't all bad. It had a lot of rubbish and terrible things, but it had
say that in the daylight.
even a broken clock
can't believe it.
writes two
Two
times
times
a
a
day. So,
Okay.
yes, this issue of public officers,
Yeah.
because it seems like this one. This example, our
Yeah,
Kuda,
the business, yeah.
Yeah, you see the opportunity, you have access, and you block out genuine business in the process.
Yeah.
So, do we need to revisit this?
So is the issue business or legitimate business? Because this is not business. This is corruption. The reason he has so much money is because he's getting kickbacks. That is not business.
Yes.
It's not legitimate business.
But the initial position was either be in government or be in the private sector.
Yes.
Because inevitably you're going to either use information or you don't have to engage directly,
Yeah.
but you will know.
You're in a position of privilege.
There's to be a clear
that is
separation.
true.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do we need to institute that? And you may be a beneficiary again.
But,
of this provision,
what
you
would
know,
come
look at it
back is whether
objectively.
it's constitutional, whether it's discriminatory against you. So it's one of the things that you'd go back to the Bill of Rights and have to clarify. If it's clear from the Constitution that we shouldn't, fine.
What's
There's
the
no
practice
problem.
in other jurisdictions? Because I believe in the UK there's a very strong separation.
Nigeria, it's like you've not seen their own version of KEMSA in the UK. Yeah, they have exactly
COVID
the same. The
billionaires.
ingredients are exactly the same. Okay, people in positions of power, companies, emergency procurement to deal with COVID, and this is the UK.
Yes, but but that was a contravention. What am I saying here? I'm saying that there is a greater incentive by public officers who are running businesses legitimately to then use their office to benefit themselves, as opposed to if they were not supposed to. So their wealth declaration would show, yes, I have these business interests, but those are the people
I have
that
not
wanted.
interfered
Yeah.
with.
I don't even know how it looks and how it will be enforced. I imagine the Scandinavians may do this thing.
Yeah, but maybe you'll find in those jurisdictions they're paying them so well that there's not, there's this little
Paying
hunger.
them so well.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm
Are
just
you
saying
we're not paying
hypothetically.
our public officers so well?
I'm just saying hypothetically, it's possible they're paying them so well that guy doesn't have the need to bridge that.
Also
Our
integrity.
tax pocket is telling us we are paying government
The
too well.
value system of the society comes into play.
But
you
is it
went
a
into
principle?
public. Yeah, you went into public service, and you're serving the public.
Yeah.
That should be one of the things that just says you're serving the public, so therefore just focus on serving the service.
Maybe don't trade with the government because of a conflict
Don't
of
trade
interest.
with
But
the
if I
government.
have a small
Yeah.
bed sitter
Business.
somewhere, or I have a matatu, or I have a
Yeah.
kibanda, that's
Do your
not really
thing.
a conflict of interest. Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
Njiro, there was a time in this country when people who are in the public service were better remunerated than those in the private. And the employer of choice was the public service.
Even today.
My gosh.
No.
Today, you can't, private sector looks at
See,
government
even
with
today.
envy. In fact, we have disproportionate
There
incentives.
is a fundamental difference here. I'm talking about a time when we had a strong shilling. So, as a public servant, it was possible to buy a house public with your salary. Buy a car with your salary.
Yeah.
The things that people hope to do, and in abundance when they get into corruption, you could actually do. People left the private sector to go into the public sector because it was an atmosphere that one could thrive in.
Yeah. Philip,
Yes,
we need to conclude the conversation now.
absolutely.
But then we want you to come now that you have been able to come to the studio and you found your way.
Yes.
Come again soon.
Absolutely. And before I go, maybe just one last message. We're all together in this fight against corruption, and we have an amazing opportunity in August to make an impact. If we feel that the laws do not have all the provisions to lock out the people we don't want, we have the vote. And there's no better vetting than at the ballot, because once you vote someone out, there's nowhere they're going. There's no appeal. There's no spending 3 years in the High Court, Court of Appeal, and so on and so forth. The best vetting is by us, the voters, at the ballot.
Very well said. Asante sana. It's 18 minutes to 10. We've been having Philip Kagucia from the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. He's the Deputy Director in charge of asset recovery. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.